geek. Talking baseball every week. Because they're Gleeman and the Geek.
And welcome to Gleeman the Geek, presented by Blackstack Brewing, family owned and operated now in a liquor store near you. I'm John Bogus from Twins Daily. With me, Aaron Gleeman of The Athletic.
Hello, John.
It's good to see you again.
Don't lie to the people, John. But okay.
The
sure.
truth is that we have the free podcast. Folks haven't heard or seen us for a couple of weeks because we're probably going to be going more like every other week with the Patreon podcast or the free podcast. But the Patreon folks, we've seen a lot of each other because we just recorded two plus hour episodes this week and the last week.
5 total hours. More, maybe. Yeah, about 5 total hours split
Right.
into 2. We did a
Royal Rumble style.
This is now going to be kind of a yearly thing because we did it last year and people liked it too. Where we talk about literally every player who appeared in a game for the Twins in the season. And we broke it down, hitters one part, pitchers the other part, and they were each over 2 hours, commercial free, some curse words in there, some hot takes in there. So yeah, if you are a
given the 2025 season, lots of curse words in there.
Yes, probably fewer than warranted. I'll even say that. So yeah, if you want to go check that out, there's about 5 hours of content where we touched on at least 30 seconds on every player, sometimes 30 minutes on some players. So
Patreon.com/Gleeman just says
yes,
like
Patreon
says at the beginning of the bottom of the screen.
Yeah.
Here, so.
Well, yeah, and if you're only listening to this, go on YouTube at the very least. That's free.
Right.
You can see just how dashing and handsome we are, the
That's
two of us. So, and I would say our takeaways from the hitter pitcher thing that we did on Patreon, where we talked about all of them. I thought the takeaways from the hitter 2.5 hours was almost every guy. Almost all of them had disappointing seasons,
right.
But that's
Yep.
kind of comes with the territory of a 92-loss team.
Yeah.
But almost every guy is we kind of, because a lot of it was, yeah, we recapped the season they just had, but we also talked about like going forward what we expect and is this guy a trade candidate and non-tender, all that stuff.
And also what the expectations were them coming into the season.
Right.
Because that ends up being fairly significant given our conclusions at the end of this.
The takeaway from hitters was like they just have so many guys who are not good defenders at their chosen position, or at least where the Twins have chosen to play them, but also haven't hit enough to make up for it.
Right.
And then on the pitching side, the 2.5 hours we did on the pitchers, and there was like 33 pitchers, I think. Luckily for us, it would have been 8.5 hours, but about 10 of the guys out of the 33 were just placeholder relievers that they used at various points, especially August and September. So there were a million of those guys, the Thomas Hatches and the Genesis Cabreras and the, whoever. And then the takeaway from the starting pitchers, which is maybe the thing where I have the biggest disagreement, like emotionally, where it's like everyone with the Twins, and we've even talked about this, views it as like, well, they have so much starting pitching depth. And I don't think that's wrong, but they really only have 2 good starting pitchers.
But you needed some of it to step forward,
right,
from year to year to year to be able to claim that. And
we've talked about that, but going kind of pitcher by pitcher through it for 2.5 hours on the Patreon side, it really kind of struck me that like they have like 6 different starting pitchers, Taj Bradley, Mick Abel, Zabby Matthews, David Festa. There's even some other guys beyond that.
Damian Woods Richardson.
So, although I view him a little bit different, but where it's like, okay, these guys are all 24, 25 years old. They all have some, and in the case of like Bradley, hundreds of innings in the majors.
Right.
They all, I think everyone kind of agrees, they got plenty of upside. They got plenty of velocity. They got plenty of raw stuff. They've dominated in the minors. They've all shown at least some flashes in the majors of like, oh, well, I see the vision with this guy. Like I can see why you'd be excited about this guy. And then you look and, they have a 5.75 ERA or something like that. And it's like what they need multiple of these guys to step forward for the quote unquote good depth or the upside to even matter. And then the other thing that struck me is like, we're not even sure they're going to have Lopez or Ryan or Ober, Ober in the sense that he might bounce back from what was a very discouraging season for him. So I don't know. It didn't make me less enthusiastic about their 2026 chances because I'm already pretty low on that. But it did sort of hammer home the idea with the hitters, with the starting pitchers, and I mean the bullpen, they just have nothing. That was another thing that we're like trying to build out a bullpen for next year as we go through all the names, and it was like, there's nothing here. Like there isn't, and that's sort of that's part of why I'm discouraged about 2026, but it's also part of why I do think this is, I will continue to say, and I know you disagree a little bit, and I've heard from people who just don't agree. I think this is going to be a very active offseason for them because I don't think they can stand pat organizationally, because I think so much of the premise of like the core and what they were going to build around is just like house of cards at this point. You know what I mean?
I mean, taking a look at, I mean, we'll start with the pitching, but I would say basically this is also the same case for the hitting side, which is, I think that was the plan last year, right? The plan last year was, listen, we've given them a lot of the hitters and a lot of the pitchers a good half a year, et cetera, to sort of dip their feet into the pool, into the Major League Baseball pool. They're getting used to the water. Now they're ready to start swimming. You know what I mean?
And they all drown.
Well, I want to say that, but they, at best, they were treading water. Do you know what I mean? Like they just weren't stepping forward. And what's striking about it is, what a high percentage of both the hitters and the pitchers didn't step forward. Like you'd expect. I don't expect everybody to take a step forward. I don't expect everybody to adjust in year one of their exposure to the majors, that they end up becoming, the pitcher we thought them to be.
This isn't year one for anyone, really.
Right, exactly right.
Mick Abel, that's it, really.
Maybe, right, yes. But it was striking about how, 4 for 4 in 4 for 4 cases on the pitching side, or for, I don't know, 7 of 8 cases on the hitting side,
right?
That they just didn't. They either continued to tread water, or they took a clear step backwards in so many different cases, and that's one of the reasons why the manager probably ends up getting fired. But it's also just, doing nothing in the off season, in part because you were hamstringed by payroll. Like I'm not going to pretend that's a non-factor on this thing, but you can see where it's reasonable for them to expect, well, some of these guys are going to step forward, right? So you're going to get half of the hitters are going to step forward, half are going to take a step backward. From one year to the next, we should be able to come close to our projections. And what we went through, especially on the hitter side, how few of them came anywhere close to their projections.
Right.
And, that was, and that's, it's damning to show that from one year to the next, and as a result, people get fired and stuff in that 2025 season. But to do it 2 years in a row could be especially damning. So on that, I kind of see your point, which is like they've got to do something. Like they can't just assume everybody's going to take a step forward when they just saw nobody take a step forward and achieve what they were supposed to be.
I agree with when you say like, you got 15 guys who maybe fit the description loosely, at least, of what we're talking about here. Some pitchers, some hitters. And you guys can picture the names we mentioned some of them, but yeah, you would expect half those guys to step forward or at least be neutral, and half of them to step back.
Five go forward, 5 go backwards, 5 kind of stay about the same, right?
Right.
So the list, right?
But here's what I'll say. This isn't just, mandated by, the baseball gods.
Sure, right.
You actually have to help these guys take those steps forward.
For sure.
And that's why, and that ain't Rocco Baldelli's job. I mean, I'm not sitting here saying he shouldn't have been fired. We went over that endlessly. I've written about it. We've talked about it. His job was not to work with young pitchers, and you know what I mean? Like, and so when you go, yeah, it's amazing none of these guys have stepped forward, that to me either means, well, a few things. Maybe they weren't as good as you thought.
Right.
Which that would go on the front office and the player development and the minors probably. Or they were as good as you thought, but once they reached the majors, they just were not able to sustain performance, let alone take a step forward. And that's on your coaching and your player development. And, that's a lot harder to fix, or at least involves a lot more people than just Cannon the manager.
Or in some cases, like we have talked a fair amount, like this, especially in the case of some of the hitters, maybe some of the pitchers too, where their skill set is sort of an extreme skill set, one way or the other. And we're like, well, we'll be interested to see how this plays in the majors, because it starts, and what we've seen is a lot of initial success sometimes, followed by league makes an adjustment, and suddenly those extreme cases, whether it's a lot of patience or a lot of power or whatever, somebody who isn't necessarily a prototypical ball player or putting up prototypical ball player stats, suddenly, the league makes an adjustment. And as you pointed out earlier, what ends up happening is become, much more of a mediocre hitter, but who can't play defense now.
Right. I
You
mean, what
know,
you're really
it's-
saying is they just didn't. You mentioned ball player, and that's the cliche, obviously. But they just don't have all around players,
Right.
and not everybody's going to be a 5 tool talent. I mean, Byron Buxton is
Right.
a great example of someone who can do it all when
Right.
he's healthy, obviously. But almost every other hitter, it's not just that they have flaws or weaknesses. I mean, any player is going to have
Sure.
flaws and weaknesses, especially young players. It's that, like, even in good scenarios, when we talk about like the Walners and the Larnacks and the Mirandas and the Julians and those type of guys, and even if you're Brooks Lee is a far better defender than all those guys, but he's not when he's playing shortstop necessarily.
Sure, right.
Like the relative to the position you're being asked to play, you look and you're like, they just don't have guys who can contribute on both sides of the ball that much,
Yeah.
which is fine. Teams can win like that. Twins teams have won like that. But it places so much emphasis on the hitting,
Right.
and their hitting has just been awful since, August 10th of last season.
Right. Yeah.
And it's not just been bad, it's been like terrible. And so, yeah, I don't know when, part of we want to, that's why people should go listen to the Patreon, but I mean, half of you do already, but the good looking, nice smelling, charming half, the other, you guys, I don't know what your problem is, but, that's obvious when they've been losing so much, but part of the reason we like talk through every player on the roster was to try to get a sense of like what's like here as we
Right.
flip
Yeah.
the calendar from 25 to 26. And you're always going to be discouraged about what the immediate future holds coming off such a bad season. And it's only been, 3 weeks or whatever since they played their last game. 3 months from now, I might have a little more optimism just because the bad taste it leaves your mouth a little bit. But
Right.
as you try to like kind of stack some blocks to start talking about 2026, you realize it's not that much different than 2025 or even late 2024. And that's part of the
Right.
reason, like I said, why I'm discouraged about their chances in 2026. But more than that, I think it's impossible for them, even if Falvey and Zoll and guys like that don't want to say it publicly or say much of anything publicly, I think it's impossible for them not to at least have the sort of that same semblance of a view. Now, they might be more optimistic. They certainly know a hell of a lot more of the inner workings and what went right, what went wrong, what they can change than we'll ever know, obviously. But they're trying to do the same thing, right? I mean, they're stacking blocks for 2026. There's some whiteboard in Target Field in somebody's
Right, of
office where
course.
they're trying to map things out. And it's like, if they're having this type of conversation, which I'd assume they kind of are, season recap, look ahead, everybody weigh in on each guy, that
running
sort of
some
thing.
projections on guys,
Right.
And see how many wins that looks like they've got sitting on the roster right now. Right.
It's a lot fewer I don't know, things you're willing to put weight on to kind of start to build towards 2026. And I mean, I also say this having watched now 3 weeks of playoffs and gearing up for the World Series now, where this is true across every sport. I'm a big Wolves fan, obviously. About 30 out of the last 33 years, I've watched the NBA playoffs and thought to myself, this isn't even the same species
Right.
that the Wolves are in. And I did think that quite a bit the last 3 weeks, watching what I think has been a really good playoff for MLB so far. A lot of really good games, a lot of, star caliber performances and all that. You watch it and you go, this isn't even, the Twins aren't even in this realm right now.
Especially considering, one of the teams that's made it to the World Series is the team that the Twins knocked out of the playoffs 2 years ago, right?
Right.
The Blue Jays, which, by the way, from 2023 to 2024, they looked like they'd taken a significant step back.
Yes.
Right?
They
Like,
they were thinking about firing their manager.
Right.
They in fact fired all their hitting coaches, just like the Twins did, with one big difference. They hired David Popkins after the Twins fired him,
Yes.
and now they have the best offense anybody's ever seen, basically.
They also re-signed their star player to a $500 million contract or something. So
you saying that the Twins didn't do that?
No, I don't remember that.
No.
I
They
think I
dumped
remember.
their
that's
star
right.
player.
That's right. They dumped some money from them.
In fairness to Vladimir Guerrero, he hit a hell of a lot better than Carlos Correa did.
Fair point. Right.
Yeah, I mean, we can get into this. I guess there's also some Twins angles to the World Series matchup that I wanted to talk about, which we'll get to in a second. But I also just, watching this, like I said, I thought especially the ALCS, which was great, between two teams, one of which hasn't been to the World Series in 32 years or 33 years in the Blue Jays, and then the other.
What happened in that 93 one? I'm having trouble remembering.
Yeah. Is your Philadelphian wife near you? Is that why you're having trouble remembering?
She's far away. I'm safe.
Is she in another room putting pins into her Joe Carter
quietest I've ever heard a bar. It went from the loudest bar I've ever heard to the quietest bar I've ever heard.
But here's the thing about 93. That was a
Dickens Inn in South Street on Philadelphia. I still remember it. It was crazy.
There had to be a looming dark cloudness.
Oh, of course.
Once Mitch Williams got involved.
Of course. I mean,
it's amazing that they got to the world. Go look up everyone who doesn't know Mitch Williams. First of all, his nickname was Wild Thing. He was a guy who had the velocity of a modern day reliever 30 years ago.
Right.
But he also had the control of a guy who had never thrown a baseball in his entire life. And so go look up Mitch Williams' numbers, and he just got chance after chance. And he had some good seasons, obviously, but he got chance after. And I think even in that season, he had a horrible numbers overall.
He had really pretty good numbers through a good chunk of the season. Then he started to melt down a little bit in the rain of the regular season. Then in the playoffs, it was just a coin flip every time.
Right.
Yeah, I think pretty much either game 4 or game 5, just before that, the Phillies had lost a game at home like 13-12 or 14-13. I can't remember.
It was
one of the longest and worst experiences ever. It was raining the whole time in Veterans Stadium. I can't remember exactly how the back and forth of that one went, but like the Phillies had a big lead, then they lost big lead. It was just a cluster F of a game. And there's one of those things where Phil Miller was at that game. He went to that game too because he goes to all these things, and we still kind of like to talk about how miserable we both were in that game. So
yeah, I'm looking at Mitch Williams' numbers, and I'm gonna take back what I said. He, at least in terms of raw numbers, I'm looking up like WPA and stuff. He had a pretty good season and also a pretty good few seasons in '93. Although I do know now he had a negative WPA.
Well, of course,
not counting the playoffs.
Right? Yeah. Okay. All right.
I mean, that day that WPA was, but in '93 he had a 3.34 ERA with 43 saves.
Yeah.
The problem with Mitch Williams, he walked 6 guys per 9 innings, and then the year before 7. I mean, it's just you wouldn't even use a guy like that.
He would just warm up by walking the bases loaded, and then just
But I mean, he was a closer for 5 years. Put up some big numbers, put up some good numbers, made an all-star team, et cetera, et cetera. It's weird because he stood out so much from a raw velocity standpoint.
Yes.
That it was like, well, of course he's the closer. He throws 95 miles an hour. Whereas I feel like now it'd be like a guy throwing 104. It'd be like, well, of course he's the closer, even if he stunk. And obviously Seattle's never made the World Series.
Right.
And I view Seattle actually sort of akin to the Twins over the last 30 years or so. I think they're like the closest comp in terms of sort of a tortured fan base in a little bit. They've had a lot of second half collapses. They've had no real success in the playoffs, all that stuff. But
and even before, I mean, the one time they finally made it, they were 20 years, 30 years into their franchise's history before they actually made the World Series.
Also, like the
Twins, for the playoffs, I mean,
they've had over the years an incredible number of star players.
Yeah.
Griffey and Ichiro and Alex Rodriguez and Randy. I mean, I'm not saying the Twins have had that, but the Twins had Mauer and Morneau and Johan, and it still didn't get across.
They also had like about 120 win season where they didn't even make the World Series, right?
Yeah, that was Ichiro's
I'm not sure they made the ALCS.
No, they did because they won their first round and then lost in the ALCS. But so watching this and seeing, George Springer hits the home run and the place goes nuts, and before that, Seattle was going nuts and guys are crying. There was all these videos, and I'm sort of peeking into Blue Jays and Mariners Twitter and just seeing the reactions to everything. And it's like, it shows, we've talked a lot about this, I think, but like from the Twins point of view, but it shows how much this means to people who are just quote unquote, just fans.
Right.
And you also see, with Cal Raleigh's crying after they lose, and Vladdy Guerrero Jr. is crying on the field, happiness and all that, and you see what it means to the players. But beyond that, you see how much it like energizes an entire fan base, or in the case of the Blue Jays, an entire country.
Right.
And it's something that the Twins have just so rarely had. And we've kind of talked about what the domino effect of that is, in Toronto's case and Seattle's case, and the Dodgers too, but the Dodgers always make these runs. You create bonded fans for life.
Right.
There are 10-year-old kids.
That is the long-term strategy. The short-term strategy in Major League Baseball is suck. Slash payroll and take your revenue sharing dollars and stink it up. Go ahead. That's the easiest way to make money year to year to year to year.
But yes, what is the way out of that? Yeah.
The way to make money long term is develop a fan base and have, know that there's going to be more people cheering for you and spending more money on you 40 years from now than there are right now, because they watched this game as a 10-year-old or as a 22-year-old. And then they raised their kids to be baseball fans. And I mean, that is the long-term strategy that's clearly
by the way,
what a missing piece.
What a crazy strategy!
Yeah, right.
What an unheard of strategy to have a good product and hook the customers for life. Oh my God! Innovation.
And by the way, it might mean you don't make as much money this year as you would in
right. And I don't want to act like the Mariners have botched all kinds of things over the years. They've shed salary. They've done all sorts of things.
Right.
Just because they made a run doesn't mean that it's some big learning thing that you can. But I will say with the Blue Jays, they tried to sign Ohtani. They've tried to sign. They gave Vladdy Guerrero $500 million. They went out and signed Gaussman to a big deal, a handful of years ago. Like, they've been extremely aggressive in this era for the Blue Jays, and it's not. I don't really care either way about the Blue Jays. I have nothing against them. The Twins beat them in '91. That's great. But it does show. It is nice, I think, to see that level of aggression pay off for a team that hasn't won anything in 30-something years, and be like, well, we signed this guy, and we tried to sign this guy. We made some big trades, and actually, look at this. Everyone loves it. Right. Now, that can just as easily go poorly, like you said. Last year, they were terrible, and they had largely the same type of thing, and they got knocked out by the it really shows what can change in 2 years. Yeah. 2 years ago, like almost exactly 2 years ago, the Twins are sweeping them at Target Field. I was in the press conference afterward with John Schneider, their manager, and he was getting asked brutal questions.
Yes, he
Basically,
was.
People were asking,
why the hell did you pull Barrios?
Yes.
Yeah, was the big question, right?
And there were all kinds of people calling for his job. And then obviously last year, very similar thing. They bring in Popkins, and it goes well for them. So that changes. But you said you keep now the
pointing
Twins
to
are an absolute mess. It's
right. One franchise continued to try and invest and get better.
Right.
Really, this is as good an example of the difference between ownership that gives an F and ownership that gives an F about something completely different, and is willing to sacrifice themselves for their to right size their bottom line.
Yeah. So
I don't know. It's a perfect example.
I think I get jealous in a lot of ways from a fandom perspective, I'd like to write about a World Series run.
Sure.
From a podcasting perspective, I'd like to do an emergency episode after the Twins version of George Springer hits a 3-run homer to can you even imagine these episodes and how fun it would be? I'd like to scroll Twins Twitter and see people happy about something instead of trying to murder each other at all times. Yep. And also new generations of fans that will sustain you as a franchise and all that. And I just watch it and I'm like, it seems so far away in the moment now. And yet we see how much changed in just 2 years for the Blue Jays, for the Twins, in opposite directions. And so I know it's not that far away, but it feels far away when you have no faith in the decision-making people or the investment people to push for that. And I would like to think that, maybe a Polat or two have been watching these and kind of took away the same sorts of things, and maybe came in on Monday morning one week and was like, how do we get this back? Like, how do we, but I'm not naive enough to think that.
There's no sign that they're interested in getting it back.
No, Believe me.
Yeah, right.
And now,
Right.
I will also say this. We are now guaranteed, no matter who wins, LA's number 1 in payroll. I think the Blue Jays are number 4 or 5 overall out of 30 teams in payroll. So we are now guaranteed that 13 of the last 14 champions will have an above average payroll. And obviously a real high percentage of those have had a top 10, top 5 payroll, all that stuff. So, there are outliers. The Mariners were right around average, not that far away. There's usually one a year where people point to as like, see, and I know there's a lot of talk of like baseball's broken and all that. I'm willing to go along with the baseball's broken thing as long as you look at the other side too, because it's always the focus on the team spending and trying
Mhm.
and trying to cultivate fans and trying to win World Series and all that. And I get that teams have such tremendous advantages. I mean, you see it with the Dodgers every year, basically. I'm willing to say that needs to be altered or changed or reined in. But what I would like to see is at least as much focus on
Sure.
the Twins end of the deal.
Right. Yeah. I mean, what we just said is, the CBA punishes teams that try. It punishes in the short term teams that try the way it works
sort
right
of.
now.
Now you can argue they don't punish them enough, but I don't
and
think
it rewards teams that suck, and it shouldn't be doing that.
That's the
Right.
part that gets me is like,
Right. That's right.
because I think a lot of people would make the argument that you need to do more to stop the same 5 teams,
Right.
Dodgers and Red Sox, Yankees, Mets, all that.
Yeah.
You need to do more to inflict pain upon them when they try to put a team together that's really good, when they spend their money,
Right.
which part of me is like, well, that's just backwards. But I get it from a
Right.
competitive 30-team environment.
Right.
But that,
but I really want to inflict pain isn't the 5 teams that haven't tried for a decade. That's who I really want to inflict pain on. Right.
One without the other does nothing. And I think actually the more you do to sort of penalize the big spending teams from spending money and trying to get stars and trying to win World Series, the more you do to sort of disincentivize that,
Yep.
the easier you make it for the bottom 5
Yep.
or 10 teams to just cash checks and not give a crap about
Yep.
anything.
That's
and that to me ruins the sport from a competitive standpoint. And it also kind of makes a weird, like, built-in excuse for a third of the league's fans where it's like, well, we never have a chance. And it's like,
Right.
well, yeah, if your owners aren't trying, you're never going to, I mean, that's going to happen in any environment.
Yeah.
And so I realize these are a lot of thoughts from kind of two sides of the aisle, and some of them are maybe contradictory to the other ones, but I don't know. It really sometimes feels like it's, from a payroll monetary standpoint, it's almost like 2 separate leagues.
Yeah.
But then also you watch the playoffs and you go, it also seems like 2 separate leagues. I watched a lot of Twins games this year, and it barely resembles what you watched in this ALCS at all. And, that's just losing versus winning, obviously, but it feels so unattainable in the moment. And yet the Twins were, 3 wins away 2 years ago from being in that exact situation.
Yeah.
But because it's broken so bad since then, and I think the comparison to how well it's gone for the Blue Jays now this year makes it kind of impossible to ignore. It was like these 2 teams just played a series 2 years ago, and the Blue Jays were completely outclassed at Target Field and walked away with their tails between their legs. And now 2 years later, they're in the World Series, and the Twins just aren't even a factor anymore. And I don't know. It's a very hard thing to watch. It's a hard thing to sort of intellectualize, but then it's a hard thing to buy in fully on one side or the other of like, how does this get fixed from a wide scale MLB standpoint when, yes, is there a just tremendous, inequality in terms of revenues and resources? Absolutely. But you also have so many teams that have kind of taken their ball and gone home on that front.
It's easier for the fans of all the teams to get angry at the Dodgers or the Yankees or the Red Sox because they're, they're ruining the competitive environment. But the teams that are really ruining the competitive environment are the teams you're not going to be angry at because you know you're going to beat them on a yearly basis. The
Right.
Tigers and or not the Tigers, the Pirates and the A's and the Rockies, and the teams that are clearly just phoning it in. And that is, I would argue, that is a bigger problem than the teams that are trying and overspending and
Yeah,
frankly trying to compete the way everybody should need to compete. So I
yeah,
think.
I mean, I don't know if it's a bigger or small, like, because I do think that there are just realities about this, that even if the Twins spent 175 million, the Dodgers are spending 400 million.
Mhm.
There is truths within that it's like that's
Sure.
inescapable. They just have an advantage, and I do think there are things that can be done or should be done to sort of try to make more equality within that. But to your point, I mean, just the true definition of like competitiveness or competing, you just have teams that aren't trying. And here's the other thing that I thought was interesting, and then we'll move on to some actual Twin stuff. But the thing that's interesting is if you look back like the last 15, 20 years, you basically need a average or better payroll to gain entry to the final four teams or the World Series,
Sure.
especially. And like I said, every couple of years there's the Royals are an outlier or whatever.
Sure.
But that kind of ties in with where we've been at. I feel like hopefully people have gotten this over the last 10 years from us with regard to the Twins. We're not naive enough or pie in the sky enough to be like, why don't the Twins spend 250 million?
Why aren't they one of the top 5 teams spending? Why aren't they one of the top 10 teams
right.
spending? We've been thrilled when they've come $20 million below the average league is spending. Right. Exactly.
And, 2023, 2022, when they were like slightly below average, 10 million below average. They were at 160 and the average was 170 or something like that. It's like, well, that at least gives you a chance to be in the party.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and
right.
Look, there are outliers. There are teams that have had low payrolls and made great runs. But on a yearly, decade basis, you basically need an average payroll to make a run. And that's why it's so disappointing to me that teams like the Twins are unwilling. And I totally get, you got these high spending teams. Not everyone can be average. That's how average works.
Sure.
But what it should be is when you think you have the pieces in place to be a good team, push towards that average.
That's when you invest, right?
And then if you don't have those pieces, or you've made a 5-year run and you've won or you've lost, whatever, then scale it back and get ready to make another push. And instead with the Twins, and this is, we've been over this territory endlessly, but where it's like, okay, 2023, that should have been the message for them to push further, to try to open up that window further and then to draw back. And it's just like you're watching teams playing great games, making fans for life, making, by the way, a whole bunch of extra revenue for themselves. And, now Vladdy Guerrero is a superstar for the rest of his life.
Right.
And now, Cal Raleigh's a super, like these things matter.
Jorge
And yet
Polanco, for that matter, is a hometown hero in
I
Seattle. Right.
By the way, now 20 years from now, when someone says Jorge Polanco, they're going to remember him as a Seattle Mariner.
Right.
And that is unfortunate. Before we get to some actual sort of Twins related things, let's talk about our first couple of sponsors, including our presenting sponsor, Black Stack Brewing.
I went to the Vikings-Eagles game on Sunday, which was not a highlight of my week. But I'll tell you what was a highlight of my week. Walking out to the concourse to grab a beer, and I pass somebody, and I see a familiar orange and black striped can pass by in their hand. And I stop this woman. I say, "Where did you get that?" And she's like, "Oh, it's just down at this." Turns out Black Stack is at a U.S. Bank Stadium. Local 755 New England IPA is there, and which is one of the things we've been kind of talking about is they've got this new distribution partner now, and you are able to find local 755 New England IPA in that orange and black striped can, but also their Slopes Pilsner, which I talked about last week, is something that beer snobs are talking to me about. But also all the new releases they let go. If you can find yourself the Metrodome Ballpark Hazy IPA, or the Sharper Image Deepa, or the Third Wheel IPA, go grab those. They're at your local liquor store. Okay, they are not just specialty beer stores anymore. From Grand Marais to Rochester, Winona to Fargo, Iowa, Wisconsin, North, South Dakota, Arizona, Washington, soon Florida. Go get them, or stop by their tap room, which is near 94 and 94 and 280.
Yep.
And if you do that, you can also get a 4-pack home to take home with you. They have an even wider variety there in their local tap room. Some of their smaller batches are there. And if you mention the code word Gleeman and Geek, you'll get $2 off a 4-pack that you can take home with you. So go check out Black Stack Brewing, certainly in your local liquor store. That's the easy one. But also, I would recommend that you go to their, if you really want to, go far afield and try all kinds of different great things, check out their tap room.
Our next sponsor is Factor Meals.
Oh, good.
We've both used these. We both like these. Here's how it works. They just send you meals and they're good.
Yep.
And they are chef prepped, dietitian approved, super easy. Just heat them up.
Yep.
I have no cooking ability whatsoever, and when I tell you they're super easy, they are super easy, and they actually taste good, and they're good for you. And they have such variety, and that changes basically every week. Where if you want vegetarian, they got it. If you want kid friendly, you got it. If you want, some special diet that you're on, they can kind of have options available for that. So it's not just one size fits all. You can actually pick and choose what you want them to send.
Yeah. It's so tasty. I haven't found a butter chicken in a restaurant that I like better than their butter chicken. It is that good.
And if you want to give it a try, you've never had a meal service like this before, and you want to give it a shot, you can eat smart at factormeals.com/Gleeman50off, like 50 off, and use the code Gleeman50off to get 50% off your first box plus free breakfast for a year. So that's the code Gleeman50off at factormeals.com for 50% off your first box plus free breakfast for 1 year. Get delicious, ready-to-eat meals delivered with Factor. Offer only valid for new Factor customers with code and qualifying auto-renewing subscription purchase. That's Factor Meals, Factor, factormeals.com/Gleeman50off, and give it a shot. Okay. Who are we rooting for here? Not the Dodgers, right? I mean,
no, not the Dodgers. That's been consistent throughout the playoffs, really.
Yeah, but here's the thing: the Dodgers are fun. I love Shohei Ohtani. I personally think that Shohei Ohtani is not just the best baseball player of all time, but it's not even close at this point.
Sure.
And that's coming from someone who wrote more about the greatness of Barry Bonds than anybody probably deserved to.
Sure.
When he was at the end of his
career.
And
Mike Trout, probably.
Yeah.
Yep.
He feels like, from like an evolutionary standpoint, he feels like the next species. Like I don't know that we'll ever see something like this.
Well, and as somebody whose son lives in Japan, has traveled to Japan and stuff, I can just tell you how ubiquitous he is there, and how much what an ambassador he is for baseball in that country. So it's I guess internationally. So
he is one of
nothing to not like about him right now.
I don't know, 3 best hitters in baseball, and has been now for 5 years. But then also when healthy, which we saw 6+ shutout in his last start, probably one of the 5 best starting pitchers in baseball. Certainly one of the best dozen starting pitchers in baseball. And I had a Cy Young vote a few years ago. I think maybe his last year with the Angels, and I think I put him 3rd. I know people like to bring up Babe Ruth. Babe Ruth never had overlap like this. Babe Ruth did both these things.
Right.
Babe Ruth was an elite starting pitcher, and Babe Ruth was the best hitter in the world, but never in the same season, because he was a pitcher, and then he was such a good hitter on like a part-time basis that they said, forget pitching, just become the greatest home run hitter of all time. But here's what I'll also say. Baseball really is the only sport, individual or team, where there's a huge segment of the populace who is dead set on thinking a guy from 120 years ago is still the best player. You know what I mean? Like, and obviously relative to his peers, he was probably the best player.
Yeah.
But go look at who was playing in the 1920s. First of all, it was just white dudes, just American dudes.
Yeah.
It's just a whole new. Shohei Ohtani couldn't have played against Babe Ruth,
right?
Even if he existed.
Right.
And so I'm one of these people in individual sports. It's much easier to see, track and field, because the numbers are just there for you. Like, you can see sort of the evolution of how good people are. But yeah, it's so in that sense, I'm certainly not going to root for the biggest market with the biggest payroll that has won 2 World Series in the last 5 years or whatever. That's just not something I'm ever going to do, whether it's the Dodgers or the Yankees or the whatever it is. but I do find them very enjoyable to watch. Like their stars, whether it's Otani or Betts or Freeman, I find all of them very, very
Yeah.
likable and
Yep.
legit in terms of the press they get and all that stuff. But and if we're trying to bring a Twins context to this, the Dodgers beat the Twins in the 1965 World Series,
Okay.
whereas the Blue Jays lost to the Twins in the 1991 ALCS.
Right.
So that I'm a little less willing to root for the Dodgers, just setting aside all
Okay.
the rest.
Okay. Good. Okay. Good. You're
But
still a little bitter about that loss 60 years ago. I get it. I'm
yeah,
with you.
sure. I'm 6. I was alive back then. I've seen the video. Although, yeah, I grew up. Everyone in my family idolized the guy who beat them, which is Sandy Koufax.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's a little tricky
Yeah, okay.
in that sense. But also, just in terms of ex-Twins involved in the World Series, the Dodgers actually have a few, but they're not. They're either injured or not prominent. I mean, you have Ben Rortvedt, who was a Twins farmhand.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Is a
I
backup
forgot.
catcher
Yep.
for them.
Yep.
And then you have 2 injured relievers, Brusdar Graterol, who they traded to the Dodgers for Kenta Maeda in 2020.
Yep.
He's hurt. And then Brock Stewart, who they traded to the Dodgers at this year's deadline, is also hurt. And then also Tommy Edmonds' brother is one of the Twins analytics guys, for whatever that's worth. But the Blue Jays got all sorts of old friends on there. I mean, we've seen Louis Varlands pitched in 10 of their first 11 games for them. Had some big blow-ups, but also had some good moments.
Sure.
Jose Barrios is injured and had been demoted from the rotation before the playoffs anyway, but obviously he's got, major Twins ties. You have Ty France, who has been injured. I don't know if he's going to be available for the World Series, but he was traded along with Varland at the deadline. And then, even Jeff Hoffman, the reliever who closed out Game 7, was in camp on a minor league deal with the Twins in 2023, and they told him he wasn't going to make the opening day roster because they felt like he wasn't fully recovered from some arm problems. He opts out of his deal. He goes to the Phillies. I think he made an all-star team with the Phillies. He was great for the Phillies.
Yeah.
And then signs a big deal with the Blue Jays. And then you even have a Twin for a day, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa,
I'd forgotten that he was over there now. That's
who never
right.
played for the Twins, but was on the Twins for a day, and is now a utility guy for them. And then last but not least, David Popkins, who we've mentioned a few times. I just saw our Blue Jays writer, Mitch Bannon, for The Athletic, wrote a feature on Popkins, basically, because Popkins came from the Dodgers, who he's now playing.
Right.
He was a single A, I believe, hitting coach in the Dodgers system when the Twins hired him to be their hitting coach. He had 3 years or whatever with the Twins, gets fired after last year's collapse, after the 2024 collapse, immediately, like within 2 weeks, gets hired to be the Blue Jays hitting coach. And, not only are their team-wide numbers phenomenal, not only did they hit the crap out of the ball to get to the World Series in the playoffs, but the guy who hit the 3-run homer, George Springer, is a 36-year-old former star who had been on a multi-year decline, pretty steep, and that turned things around and got his bat speed back up, and credits Popkins for the work he did with them and all that stuff. So that one hurts too, because the Twins, for all I know, might be looking for another hitting coach at this point. I guess that probably depends on the manager search, which we're gonna.
I was going to say,
talk about.
I think they're looking for another coach as well.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit. So the manager search is ongoing. 2 out of the 8 openings have already been filled. The Angels did not hire Torrey Hunter, who was interested in that job, and did not hire Albert Pujols, who it sounds like might be going to another team as their manager.
Okay.
Well, the Pujols thing is interesting because the Angels pay him $1 million a year as like a personal services contract as part of the contract he had with them as a player.
Got it.
So it was like, I wonder if they said to him, like, be our manager for free.
Right.
Or something like that.
Right. Yes.
I don't know what. So they ended up hiring, though, an ex-Twin in Kurt Suzuki.
Oh, wow.
Who was
no kidding. I did not notice that. That's awesome.
All-star for the Twins. What year was the All-Star game in Minnesota? I think that's when it was.
2014?
Because Perkins closed it out.
Right.
And Suzuki was catching him. I think I have that right. Maybe not. So he's their new manager. That's a tough gig, although the Twins are a tough gig too. This also, we can get into this more, but like I do wonder. I don't know that the Twins were interested in Kurt Suzuki. I haven't seen anything reported about that, but I wonder, like, would he have chosen the Angels anyway? And he's been working for the Angels as like a special assistant the last couple of years, which has kind of become a trend. Skip Shoemaker, who replaced Bruce Bochy in Texas,
right? Yeah,
had been in their front office for the last year, and it's kind of like you got a guy on ice.
Yeah.
And I don't know that the
I'm
Twins
wondering
have
about
really done that.
Flaherty for San Diego,
Right.
who I've heard is on the Twins list. So
The other hiring that just happened a couple hours ago is that the San Francisco Giants hired the University of Tennessee's head coach, Tony Vitello.
hmm,
And what's amazing about this is it wasn't that long ago, 2019, 6 years ago, that the Twins hiring Wes Johnson from the college ranks as their pitching coach
right,
was seen as like shocking
right,
and
yep,
was criticized and was the biggest outside the box move, and like people were so skeptical about it and all that. And now you fast forward 6 years, and not only have numerous hitting and pitching coaches from the college ranks been hired since then, now they're just hiring
right.
a
That
manager
is.
from college.
I am a little surprised by that. That does seem.
And this
Huh?
guy has, as far as I know, no professional coaching experience. I think he's like his mid 40s. You know, he turned around the University of Tennessee. He took them
Sure,
from nothing to something big in college baseball. But he's also seen as sort of a controversial figure. I've only read up on him. I don't know. I don't watch college baseball, but where he's like, you know, he's got a little smack talk to him, and his players celebrate homers and all that sort of thing, which I'm all in favor of. So
sure,
this really is a pretty interesting hire by the Giants, and Buster Posey is running things for the Giants.
right.
And it sounds like I
Yet
saw,
another catcher.
yeah, yet another
Right,
former
yeah,
catcher.
yeah.
Yeah, if you want to manage, be a weak hitting catcher. Don't be a
So
good hitting catcher. Be a
right,
weaker hitting catcher. So yeah, those are two very interesting hires, and it also, you know, in 6 years to go from, oh my God, what do you mean the Twins hired a pitching coach from college to a much more successful team than the Minnesota Twins, by the way, the Giants,
right,
just hiring the guy from Tennessee to be
right.
their manager. It shows how quickly kind of the Overton window or the acceptable range of things can change in sports, which
Yeah,
becomes we always hear it's a copycat league in every sport. And not that Wes Johnson had some amazing success with the Twins, but he had some success with the Twins. And I know Derek Johnson was hired, I think, from Vandy with the Brewers and had some success. And there's been some other ones that I can't pull off the top of my head. But once you see that college coaches are not like, three-headed aliens,
right,
they're just guys who coach in a different environment.
right.
It goes pretty quick from shocking to, oh, not that this isn't shocking, but I would bet you will see more of this, not less of this.
Yeah, well, I mean, clearly it's trending that direction, right?
Yeah.
The question becomes, this is one of the things we've kind of talked about with regard to the Twins, which is what I like about that hiring for San Francisco is almost by definition are challenging your own culture by bringing that in, because you're challenging Major League Baseball's culture. And
Right.
your culture is a side part of that. And one of the things I'm kind of hoping that we see with whoever the Twins bring in is that there's some aspect to that person that sort of challenges their culture a little bit, that challenges sort of the overall I'll call it complacency. That's not quite the right word, but it's kind of close to it, that they have seen there. And we asked Derek Falvey about that during the press conference. He says he's open to a lot of just so long as there's a certain level of alignment in terms of what you're trying to do and how you're trying to do it. He wants to be open-minded about how that works. I will judge whether or not that is the case based on, I think, who they are hiring, whether that is done by bringing in somebody from college or whether it's that brought in from bringing in a more experienced, been there, done that manager who
Right.
might have their own thoughts, or whether that is done even by bringing in a player whose reputation is more maybe less analytical and more other things. That might also challenge it, but I will be interested to see what they bring in and whether or not we find any kind of evidence that they are going to be able to bring their own voice that is maybe partly discordant voice into that echo chamber that seems to exist right now.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't count on it,
I know you won't.
I mean, part of it is, yeah, I agree with you. I mean, you just need other voices, but the truth is they need help.
Yes,
Like
well,
they need someone who isn't just going to follow what they do, because it's clear now what they do is not working.
Right.
And so, yeah, you can say just from a big picture theoretical standpoint, you don't want someone who's just a puppet of the front office. And I don't think Baldelli was that, but he certainly worked in collaboration with the front office on almost everything. I think just in general, in any walk of life, you want somebody who's got a little bit of edge to them, a little bit of, difference to them. But then beyond that, they're bad puppeteers at this stage. You know what I mean? And so you want it for like their sake too.
Right,
The front
yeah,
office
right,
should
okay,
want that because
yeah.
they need help.
Right,
They need
yeah.
a college coach or something who has their own way of doing things and success. The other thing, and we've talked about this over the years, is, and this is true in other sports too, but I think it's definitely true in baseball. Nobody has any clue whatsoever who will be a good manager and who won't until it happens.
Sure.
And anybody who tells you differently is absolutely full of BS or thinks so highly of themselves that they can just flip coins basically and choose. Because the reality is, we've both been doing this a long time. We've seen a lot of, oh, this guy's a natural manager. He's going to get a job as soon as he retires. We've seen a lot of those guys flame out in a year. We've seen a lot of hires where it's like, who's this guy? We don't even know who this is. Have a 10-year career and win World Series. And we've seen everything in between. We've seen retreads have success in their new spot. We've seen retreads have nobody has any clue until it happens. Now you can certainly, it's not a true coin flip. I mean, you can make informed decisions, but the reality is until you see it in action, it's an impossible thing to sort of project or predict. And all the great, I mean, every manager hire, 90% of manager hires are, great baseball men and have great reputation. They're not hiring guys who are bad in the clubhouse.
Right,
And yet,
of course.
40% of them are immediately terrible. Yeah. And, very few of them have sustained success. And so in a way, I like the idea of saying, no, is the University of Tennessee anywhere near Major League Baseball? No.
Right.
But he's still dealing with dozens of players. He's dealing with boosters. He's dealing with NIL stuff. He's doing all the same strategic stuff, obviously. There's plenty of, college baseball might be deeper in analytics than Major League Baseball because it's a cheaper way to try to get an edge, And so I do kind of like the concept of finding a guy who has built his own ecosystem in a college environment that didn't have, it's not like he took over, a hugely successful program. He built it into something that matters. And I have no clue. Nobody has any clue if that will transfer or not. And I know there's a lot of skepticism about that, but I do like the idea of a guy who's like built his own house somewhere where the environment to build the house wasn't great for him.
Sure.
And now you're saying, come here and build our house too. I kind of like that as a concept.
Yeah. Right.
Also, it's not as if there's 20 ready-made major league managers in college. This might be a unicorn situation where he's like the one guy that at least Buster Posey believes in. Okay, before we get into the Twins specific manager search, let's talk about our next couple of sponsors here.
Prize Picks. My fantasy football teams are not doing particularly well. My what is it, a suicide league, whatever I'm doing with the power trip, where I'm kind of limping along there. Made some bad calls over the last few weeks, but I don't let that slow me down in terms of offering up opinions on what I think is going to happen or what I don't think is going to happen. And turns out I've been having a little bit of success doing that with Prize Picks. Prize Picks is just an easy way for you to make your predictions on particular players. You don't have to limit it to those people that you drafted 3 months ago. You can just pick out a game, and right now there are a lot of games to pick out. You've got the NFL every Thursday and Sunday. You've got college football on Saturdays. You've got the NBA season starting up right now. The Wolves are going on. You might have some sense from game to game what you think Ant is going to be doing, what kind of numbers he's going to be putting up, or even Rudy Gobert or whoever. Minnesota Wild also going strong right now. All of that is available in Prize Picks. And all you do is you set your lineup. Your lineup is, here's these players. Here's what, Prize Picks is saying is sort of a guess on what number of, passing yards they'll have or points they'll have or whatever, right? Depending on the sport. And you just say, well, I think it's going to be less than that one. I think it's going to be more than that one. I've got a little insight in what I think is going to be happening. And based on that, you make your calls. And based on that, you hopefully walk away with some money, which I have been fortunate to be able to do.
So all you have to do, you download the Prize Picks app today and you use the code Gleeman and you get $50 in lineups, which is just pairing players together that you pick. after you play your first $5 lineup. So that's the code Gleeman, Gleeman, on the Prize Picks app. You get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineups. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. And then our next sponsor here is
Harry's.
They actually
Razors.
they just sent me their new well, we're going to talk about it here that
That's
you guys
right.
can
That's
get.
right. You're good. Yep.
And as always, I'm impressed. I like over the year they've been a long time sponsor, and they always when they have a new product or a new offering, they send us a sample, and I always open it and I'm always like, boy, if I wasn't trying to cover my face with a beard so much, I would love to use this product every day. Like it really, and one of the big draws of Harry's in general is you don't have to go to a store and beg some guy who's annoyed to be there to open up a case and get you a razor. And then you can also not have to stick with a worn out razor for months because you just don't want to get a new one.
That's
you
right.
just do a couple of clicks. They'll send it right to your door. Nice packaging, good quality. And the price point, because they basically cut out the middleman, is as good or better.
It's about half the price a lot
Yeah.
of the time. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, they just figured out everything that all the other razor companies didn't want to do. They wanted to buy shelf space, or they wanted to have their stuff locked up behind things so people couldn't steal. Oh, Harry's just hacked all of that, and now they've made it easier than ever for you to get a close shave. And now they've got the brand new razor blade with a heavier handle than ever. It just feels good in your hand. You're gonna be able to check it. So for a limited time, our listeners can get the Harry's Plus trial set for only $10 at harrys.com/Gleeman. That set includes the all-new Harry's Plus razor, one refined 5-blade cartridge, a 2-ounce foaming shave gel, which, by the way, is really good for traveling, and a travel cover, also good for traveling, to protect your blades on the go. Just go to harrys.com/Gleeman to claim this offer, and after you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them, and please support our show and tell them that we sent you.
Okay, let's get into the Twins manager search, or at least what we know about
Yep.
it. So, bunch of names have been reported by Dan Hayes and Bobby Nightingale and Lavelle Neal and various other people. I'm guessing there are at least a name or two that haven't been reported, but I don't know that obviously to be the case. What we do know, there's about a half dozen guys that we can kind of go point by point here and at least give you the outline of what they are and what we know about them and why the Twins might be interested in them. So let's start with some ex-members of Rocco Baldelli's coaching staff.
I was going to say, let's.
Seems like the
I'm interested to see how you group these. Yeah, go ahead.
So, number one, let's start with Derek Shelton, who actually was a member of Molitor's coaching staff and stayed when Molitor got fired and Baldelli got hired, and then was the bench coach in 2019 under Baldelli, and then later got hired away to be the Pittsburgh Pirates manager.
Yes.
And he just got fired as the Pirates manager. Derek Shelton is one of those baseball lifer guys. He was with Cleveland. He was with Tampa Bay. He was with the Twins. I'm probably forgetting places too. And he's one of those guys that is, you look at him and you go, there's a baseball guy. He's got the beard. He's a little bit of a gruff demeanor. He's a big dude, all this stuff. Like I don't want to say he's intimidating because my experience with him is he's a good dude. But he's definitely, you look at him and you go, oh, this is one of those leader of men type of guys. Like this is one of those guys. And it's like, he has managing experience and he was just fired in the middle of this season.
Yeah. He had, 3 years with the Pirates? Basically?
No, more than that. 6 years.
Wow.
6 years.
Okay. Wow.
2020 until June of this year or whatever it was, or May of this year.
You should get an award just for lasting 6 years with the Pirates.
Well, this is the thing that bumps me a little bit off from his candidacy. I think he's obviously got a track record with the Twins. I think he might have been in Cleveland when Falvey was in Cleveland too. He's definitely a well-respected baseball guy. I can tell you that. I find him to be an interesting guy. The players back then seemed to like him. He's certainly a retread in that he had 5.5 years as a manager.
Sure.
And I think he's like in his mid-50s, something like that. The problem though is I'm certainly willing to sit here and give someone leeway for not being able to win with the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Right.
And he had 306 wins and 440 losses. That's pretty bad. And they didn't get higher than fourth place in the 5-team NL Central, and I think I'm looking, the most they ever won was 76 games. He didn't even have a 500 record with them.
Right.
Now, I'm willing to say, who can win with the Pirates?
Sure.
But here's the problem. Isn't this a similar situation?
Well, it could be.
I'm not saying the Twins are the Pirates, but they're closer
No.
to the Pirates than they were 3 years ago, or 10 years ago even. And
Sure.
if you're willing to say like, well, what'd you want them to do? The Pirates have a bottom 5 payroll, and they don't bring in veterans to support their young talent, and they struggle to develop hitters and all this sort of stuff, which is all true. That's why a 410 winning percentage is misleading, probably.
Sure.
But aren't the Twins
You just
of...
mentioned three
Right.
potential criticisms of the Twins, the same one. So
Yeah, and so what's different? If I were interviewing him for the Twins job, I would want to say to him, and I guess
how are we going to be different than the Pirates?
Now, this would require the Twins officials sort of admitting that they're trending towards Pirates territory, which maybe they are less willing than me to say that. But I definitely would want to say, like, what have you learned from that you can apply to this, or what approach would you take differently? Do you think you made mistakes with the Pirates, or do you think it was just a lost cause? And if it was a lost cause for 5.5 years, which I'm willing to believe it was, kind of tell me why this isn't a similar lost cause.
Right,
and, you can't even say, well, yeah, the Twins are that way now, but they have so much young talent. I mean, the Pirates have Paul Skeens, and they had some pretty good young players over the last 5 years. They've just, the infrastructure of the rest of the roster has just been so lacking and not invested in, and they can't develop any hitters and all that. So I don't know. I think he's intriguing. I definitely am not surprised that he's someone they're interviewing.
Right. I mean, he was one of the names we were coming up with
right
before we actually heard he was part of it.
Right. The other one who was also on that 2019 staff with Derek Shelton is James Rowson, who was the hitting coach of that 2019 Bomba squad under Baldelli.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe I have the timeline right, that Rowson was hired away from the Twins after the 2019 season by the Miami Marlins because they gave him a promotion and they made him the bench coach and I think the hitting coordinator or something like that. And what was interesting about that, you say, well, yeah, if a guy's going to get promoted and more money and more responsibility, it's hard to block that in sports. That's, it's not a lateral move. But the interesting thing is, at the moment the Marlins hired James Rowson after 2019, they offered him the bench coach job. Well, the Twins couldn't offer him the bench coach job in that exact moment because Derek Shelton. Right. But then within that same offseason, and I think it was pretty quick after Rowson left,
right. You've got
then
it right.
Shelton left the bench coach job to become the Pirates manager.
Right.
And then it was like, well, hell, if that would have happened in reverse, or there would have been a month delay for both of those, I feel like it would have been pretty obvious of them to just be like, well, we'll match that. You can be our bench coach too, to James Rowson.
That's right.
So Rowson went to Miami, and Twins fans complained about that, even though the Marlins didn't really hit and didn't really have success. Although that's similar to the Pirates situation where it's like, what do you want them to do? It's the Marlins.
I'm taking a look. I just took a look at the dates right now. Yes, James Rowson was hired on October 24th, almost exactly 6 years ago today, to be the bench coach of the Marlins underneath Don Mattingly. And then, yes, Derek Shelton was hired 1 month later on November 27th to be the manager of the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Yeah, and I remember talking at the time, and they felt like their staff had been sort of decimated. And then in that same, I think they lost Jeremy Hefner to the Mets and some other things.
Yeah,
and then that led to, well, not a shakeup with the coaching staff, but they had to hire some guys that maybe they weren't as thrilled with. He leaves the Marlins. I think he was I don't know if he was with Detroit for a year, but he ends up as the Yankees hitting coach recently. And that's a pretty prominent job. But I also, and this goes back to my point, I'm not even really talking about specific candidates, but it goes back to my point that no one knows. In the same way you can say, well, what'd you expect Shelton to do in Pittsburgh? Or what'd you expect Rowson to do with the Marlins hitters? Well, okay, he was the Yankees hitting coach. Well, they hit great. Did he, fix Aaron Judge? Or was Aaron Judge, he's been amazing this whole time. You know what I mean? That's part of the blurriness of evaluating coaches. That I think.
Well, you're also not hiring him as the hitting coach. You're hiring him as the actual manager,
And this is something too that, a guy can be, you see it in football all the time. A guy's an amazing offensive coordinator. It's a lot different when he's the the head coach,
Right.
because sometimes he's not even calling plays. And if he is, you're dealing with other stuff, which is why you see in football a lot of times, if a offensive coordinator gets hired as the head coach, they'll often bring in a veteran defensive coordinator to just run that side of the team. We can't really do that in baseball. And it's why, a guy like Shelton, who can be an amazing hitting coach or a really good bench coach, that sort of thing, it's a whole different story when you're trying to manage. A guy like Rousen, who has now had a lot of success as a hitting coach in different places, well, he's never been a major league manager. It's a whole different story. His strength as a hitting coach might not be the same as the strengths needed to run the team on a day-to-day basis. But then the other side is there isn't as much opportunity for him to influence the hitters because he's managing the team. Right. And so, but again, he was very well regarded here. It's not like they fired him. And so that also, he was a name that when Baldelli got fired, if you go back and listen to that first episode we did that night, I'm sure we mentioned Rousen too. Those are two of the more obvious, I would say, candidates. Like,
he was also similarly kind of trapped in sort of the same thing that Shelton was trapped in, that he's the bench coach, but for one of these teams that's never really going to compete. You're kind of already handicapped. It was with the Marlins. It's underneath Mattingly. Mattingly and the Marlins just agreed to separate after 3 years. 3 years into that, like basically his contract ended with the Marlins, and they both just said, "Yeah, you know what? Nah."
Do you know where?
We're both
by the
done.
way, do you know where Mattingly is now?
No, where is he at? Is it with the Dodgers?
Blue Jays.
Blue Jays. Oh, really? Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
He used to manage the Dodgers. By the way.
I know. Right. That's why I thought maybe he went back.
So those two, not at all surprised. For Shelton, it's a situation where he wants to get right back into managing. For Rousen, it's a situation where he's saying, I've been a pretty prominent hitting coach in a couple of different places here. I've been a bench coach in Miami. This is an opportunity that I think makes sense. Like, this is the next step up in the progression of a coaching career. Outside of the, Baldelli coaching tree, I guess I would say.
Right.
You got sticking into the AL Central. You have Vance Wilson, who was a longtime catcher, a weak hitting catcher in the majors.
Okay.
Has been the Royals' third base coach for quite a while now. He also interviewed for the Giants job recently that ended up going to Vitello that we just talked about. I don't know a ton about him. I mean, I remember him as a player, right-handed hitting catcher, backup catcher type. I know he's known as a pretty big personality, but in terms of, what his beliefs are as a manager, what his tendencies are, this is one of those things where it's like,
it's really hard to tell from a, I mean, even if they were actually a member of your organization, it's hard to tell. Right.
I mean, this guy, I can tell you that he was a respected player, and he's a respected clubhouse guy as a coach. I don't know the skills of a third base coach that you can see have no real bearing on managing. And also there's a lot more to being a third base coach. Most third base coaches also work with outfielders or work with hitters or work with catchers or whatever. Hank Conger was a base coach for the Twins, and that was his responsibility from, 7 p.m. until 11 p.m. But his real responsibility was working with catchers and stuff like that. So I suspect it's similar with Vance Wilson. He's certainly a guy who's been around the block. Certainly a guy who's been known as well respected, but I mean, in terms of pointing at, what sort of changes he would bring and all that, impossible to say.
Sure.
I mean,
of course.
On the retread manager front, Scott Service, who was fired in mid 2024 by the Mariners and replaced by University of Minnesota alum Dan Wilson, who has now led them to the ALCS.
Right.
Scott Service was a manager for a long time with
like 6
the
years,
Mariners.
7 years, right?
And by the way, what do we know about him? Long-time weak-hitting major league catcher.
Exactly right. Yeah.
He was 9 seasons, basically 8.5 seasons with the Seattle Mariners from 2016 until the late, actually, in 2024. 514 winning percentage.
Yep.
Let's see. Each of his last 4 years were 500 or better. They never won the division because the Astros were running roughshod over that division, and they only made the playoffs once in 2022. And then
they came just short a couple times too.
Well, he got fired in 2024 because they were in position and then collapsed.
Okay. Yeah.
I hate to say this because it's going to, sort of poison people's minds towards Scott Service, who I think did a decent job as a manager with the Mariners. and is definitely known as a good dude. All this stuff that we're going to say about all these candidates.
Right.
It's a very Baldelli-like tenure with the Seattle Mariners.
A little bit. Yeah.
In that you have a winning record, but you have 2 playoff wins in 9 years. Baldelli had 3. You ended on a low note in that the team sort of collapsed around him. Now, that would have been the case if Baldelli had been fired after 2024.
Sure.
And the other thing is the team succeeded this year without him in ways they hadn't with him. Now, I'm not going to, who knows? That could just be randomness. But, I think what makes Service appealing, and let me look, he's 58 years old. The Mariners gig was his only managing gig, but again, 8.5 years. Look, he played 11 seasons as a catcher. He seems to be more of like the kind of calming veteran voice. I don't know that much about his time, but just reading and asking around a little bit about him, he's more of like the like the father figure, maybe a little more than like the bust some butts here, which is fine. I do think he had success in Seattle. I mean,
yeah,
he had a winning record over 9 years with a team that hadn't done anything in 30 years, basically. He had a couple of 90-win seasons. It ended badly in a collapse, and they've had success without him. And I think even saying it's a Baldelli-esque tenure isn't necessarily a criticism if people are sort of able to detach. I mean, here's the truth, and tell me if you agree with this. I think if we could sort of wash everyone's memory of Rocco Baldelli, or like name him, Ron Barker instead of Rocco Baldelli,
right.
He would be the type of candidate that they would be looking to interview.
Sure.
Which is a still young, well-respected former player who had a winning record in not ideal circumstances for 7 years with the Twins, ended poorly, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's a lot that's true of Service.
For the 2026 season, when there's 6 new spots available, Rocco Baldelli will be doing this same tour as Scott Servais is probably doing after the 2025 season. Like he will be that season's manager who I've got 6 years of experience, and I'm well regarded, and I know how to speak well to the media, and I'm known as a good guy, and I've got a 500 record over it. We made it to the playoffs a couple times, and you should probably want to take a look at me and have a conversation. Right?
Yeah, it's Service, by the way. I know it's spelled Service.
Right? Yeah.
Okay, moving on. Former Twin as a player, Nick Punto.
All right.
Who has been the Padres infield coach this season, I think. Previously, after retiring, I think he coached high school for a while, and then I think he was a special assistant, like in a front office role. But he was on San Diego's coaching staff this past season. Still pretty young. I mean, obviously, a lot of people listening to this know him as a player. Played quite a while. In the majors, played for the Twins, was acquired. Here's how long ago he was acquired.
I remember who he was acquired for
Eric Milton, along with Carlos Silva in 03 from the Phillies. And then played, let's see, how many years did Nick Punto play? A lot. 14 years in the majors. Half of that basically was with the Minnesota Twins.
Because Eric Milton was going to be making too much money.
Yeah.
He was going to be making $8 million that year.
Yeah. Can you imagine? And that was a lot back then.
It was a lot back then.
Relatively. Punto, I feel like in retrospect, Punto's value comes down to your ability to measure defense. Really. And in 04, 05, 06, 07, when he was with the Twins, and longer than that too, everyone knew he was a good defender. And it was in the kind of the infancy of defensive statistics, metrics, and that sort of thing. And he certainly graded out really well. But I feel like people were less willing to say, yeah, this guy can't hit. And he had a career 648 OPS with the Twins, which is a 74 OPS plus, which means he was 26% worse than an average major league hitter. Just very little power, 250 hitter, drew some walks, had some speed, but just a very bad hitter. And I think even then, and I was probably guilty of this too. I mean, I was 22 years old writing about this or whatever, but where it was like, yeah, we know he's a good defender, but he can't possibly be good enough in the field to make up for that sort of bat. And there is still some skepticism in that type of player now, but you look now and, the more you feel confident in quantifying this stuff, the more you can say, Well, he was 15 runs above average defensively, or he could play
Sure.
every position above average, or he could, all this stuff. And I'm looking now, he was a good role player, and he had some years where he was a starting caliber player. And I mean, the Twins would have killed the last 5 years to have him as their, fifth infielder, their backup infielder, the utility guy. He was a legit shortstop. He was great at third base. He could play second base. He was a switch hitter. He had some speed. He drew some walks. He was not a good hitter. I mean, he was an eighth or ninth place hitter. But it's a lot easier to kind of view him as a good role player as opposed to, Gardy loves him and that's why he's playing. Gardy loved him because he could pick it. I mean, he was just great defensively. And I wonder how much of that kind of remembrance of him as a player, and I think he also was kind of stretched as a regular, and because the Twins didn't have money and they had some injuries, he often would find himself playing 500 at-bats instead of 300 at-bats, and the flaws are more easily exposed. And then you toss in the stuff where it was like he slid headfirst into first base, which is just false hustle and all that stuff. He became, and I'm guilty of this, 20 years ago or whatever, something of like a whipping boy or like a, why is he playing that much? And I wonder how much that paints people's perception of him as like a managerial candidate, because I think a lot of Twins fans of a certain age hear that and they go, Nick Punto?
Right. Yeah.
But the reality is,
do we not have enough of the people on the roster that can't hit?
Right.
Right. Yeah. Like right. Yeah.
The reality is Punto is as close as you're going to get to a poor hitting catcher.
Right.
Which is what a lot of managers are, he was a poor hitting utility guy.
Right.
And he did do the little things well. Now, do I think sliding head first into first base is a trait that I want a manager handing down to his players? No, I don't. But if you want good defense and base running, he did that. Now, I don't know that he'll be able to teach that, which is, again, one of the problems with trying to determine who's going to be a good manager. What you were as a player doesn't translate really in any way. There have been plenty of good defensive players who had horrible defensive teams. There's been plenty of Rocco Baldelli was not a power hitter, but his best teams with the Twins were power hitting teams. So
you also don't know that much. It's not like he's got a 3-4 years experience on a Major League Baseball coaching staff. He's only been out there one. I mean, he's much closer to a Nelson Cruz hire, a Torrey Hunter hire, etc., than he is, or a Justin Morneau hire, than he is some of these other guys who have at least spent a few times in the organization, tried to learn a little bit about the different roles that you can have within those organizations, other than player. But what, he had like 15-year career or something like that. Like it was
I mean, he was certainly a guy who was extremely well liked in all clubhouses, was seen as a leader despite the fact that he wasn't a star. I do give him some credit. I agree with what you're saying. Like, he's much more of a, Shelton and Rosen, they were on Baldelli's coaching staff. The Twins know them extremely well. They liked them. They hired them the first time around, etc. Scott Service is just a well-respected, reasonably successful retread manager, if that makes sense. Vance Wilson's a guy you've seen in your division. He hasn't managed before, but he's been on a major league coaching staff for a really long time. Punto falls more into, like you said, like, he's not a super recently retired, but he's like in his mid-40s. He's just a guy who's respected and people think is a good baseball person. But I will give him, compared to like Torrey Hunter or AJ Brzezinski or Morneau or whatever, he has at least gone out and gotten a major league coaching job.
Well, that's true.
And done
You're
it.
Right. You're right.
And one of the things I think is interesting about, like, everyone wants Torrey Hunter because he's a beloved player.
Right.
And I'm not against that, but if Torrey Hunter really wanted to be a manager, why not be a bench coach somewhere?
Yes, he could have spent some time. Right. Yeah.
Same thing with Brzezinski. I mean, Brzezinski's doing the media thing, which is great. He's probably making a lot more money doing that than he would be as a assistant hitting coach somewhere. But I do think there's something to be said for someone like Punto working in a front office or going out and at least putting a year in on a major league coaching staff, because it's an environment that you don't know until you do it.
Right. And if you love it, why don't you want to do that?
Yeah.
I mean? Like,
I wonder if we're going to see less. First of all, to like Torrey Hunter's credit, Stephen Vogt got hired immediately after retiring. Mark Kotze got hired. Like, guys are being hired with no coaching experience. So from his point of view, it's like, well, why do I need coaching experience? Sure. But I think we're going to see more and more of that, because the other reality is, even compared to 20 years ago, and certainly like 40 years ago, recently retired players have so much money and ability to go into other things. Torrey Hunter's got like a barbecue
Right. Yeah, I
empire
know. Yeah.
in Texas going.
Yep.
So it's like, why do I want to go be the fourth in command on a coaching staff when I can have hundreds of millions of dollars and be an entrepreneur and be with my family and whatever? I don't blame them for that.
Right.
But I do think it becomes a tricky thing when it's like, well, why don't they hire this guy? And it's like, well, he might be interested in managing, but is he interested? Like, did he go do something below managing?
Yeah.
But again, I don't know how much that's even really needed at this point. I mean, some of the better managers just went straight from playing to managing in recent years. But even with someone like Baldelli, I mean, I think there was a sense that because he was so young, that he must have been just off playing. But I mean,
He spent like
worked
4 years doing other stuff.
more
in
than
the
that. I mean,
organization.
he was on the scouting side for the Rays.
Right.
He was going to high school games and scouting people. He worked in the Rays front office, and then he was a member of the Rays coaching staff for multiple years too.
Right.
So Nick Punto, selfishly, I know he's a good quote. So,
Right. Yes.
I'd take him. Shelton's a pretty good quote. I've talked to him a few times. I talked to him at the winter meeting a couple years ago. The last known candidate, at least that I know of, unless I'm missing somebody, feel free to jump in, is kind of a Punto-esque player, Ramon Vasquez, who was a light hitting utility
Yeah, I've heard that name.
infielder. I used to love having him on. There was a simulation game called Diamond Mind that I used to play a keeper league, and I used to love having him because he was a left-handed hitting backup infielder who hit righties well enough to start. So I
Right.
would get him cheaply, and then I'd make him like my platoon second baseman or something like that. He's been the Red Sox bench coach and has also coached in the minors and been on other staffs, but since retiring, relatively young. Another guy who played like a decade in the majors as a light hitting utility man. You start to see the type, right? Like these are all the candidates. Backup catchers and utility men are the candidates. He's confirmed that he was interviewed. I think he did a talk to the Boston Globe or something like that about it, and has already at least done, I think, a Zoom interview with them. Who knows how they're going to trim this candidate pool? But I don't like in terms of known candidates. Is there anybody I've left out?
I mean, the only names I've heard as rumored candidates, I guess I'm not even sure I necessarily know that they have in-person interviews or so on. There was the bench coach for the Cleveland, who I think
Yeah.
we've dropped his name a couple times.
Craig Albernez is his name.
That's the
I
one,
think.
right?
Yeah.
And I also heard the bench coach for the Padres, Ryan Flaherty.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of, I know Ryan Flaherty is also somebody who's been considered for both the Padres job. And he's
Yeah.
another good example of what you talked about. Like, hey, we've got a pretty good organization here. We've already had this guy in the organization for a lot of time, and maybe we just take him and promote him up the
Right.
ladder, which is, I think, part of
And the,
part of the
and the
concerns about interviewing him.
The other thing I'll say about this group of candidates, Shelton, Rouson, Wilson, Service, Punto, Vasquez. I'm not trying to like denigrate these guys as candidates. Again, I'm not claiming to know who makes a good manager and who isn't. But this isn't the A pool. This isn't the hot shot rising guys like the two names you just mentioned. It's not the guy who's changing the face of college baseball like the Vitello. It's not, I don't know, Nelson Cruz, who's even like a wow factor from a player standpoint. Although we did hear from a listener who told us that he, I don't want to give the details, but he thought Nelson Cruz was in town a week or so ago,
Right. Yeah.
which is kind of interesting. But it wouldn't surprise me if the Twins interviewed Nelson Cruz or at least reached out to Nelson Cruz. It also sounds like Torrey Hunter either told the Twins he didn't want it or the Twins, they just both sides realized it wasn't going to happen. It sounds like the Twins like at least talked to Torrey Hunter. I don't think they interviewed him for whatever that's worth. But
Torrey's
I guess
got a lot on his plate right now. So
yeah, I mean, I'd rather make great barbecue in Texas than manage this team in 2026.
I was thinking we might need to do some research on that if you want to head down to Texas with me.
Hayes went there and went to the restaurant and wrote about it.
Oh,
and he said it was legit.
All right.
And then maybe 2 years ago, Hunter was in town in the clubhouse and I talked to him about it. And I basically said to him, describe your food to me. I'm fat. I want to hear it. And he did. And I was like, that sounds really good.
All
He's
right,
like, yeah,
good.
we'll have to get you down there.
Speaking of which, we got to mention that Animalis is opening
tomorrow.
Yeah, the 23rd.
Or today, whatever.
The 23rd.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're going to let it die down a little because I imagine the first couple weeks, but we're going to do a show there.
Oh, for sure.
John, who runs Animalis, has been kind to us in the past. We've had
Yes.
events there in the past.
Right.
I remember he made a Sloppy Joe Mauer.
Yes, he did. It
Sloppy
was very
Joe's
good.
for one of
Yeah,
our
for
events.
one of our
That was really
events.
good.
Yeah.
So we're definitely going to go there and eat some barbecue and maybe do a show. But I guess the last thing on these candidates, what I was saying was, I'm not saying these aren't good candidates, but this strikes me as not sort of the rising hotshot candidates, which makes sense to me because those are the guys that multiple teams are going to be interested in. And how are the Twins going to win? They're not going to offer more money.
Right.
They're not going to offer more immediate chance for success in 2026. I think it's hard, to even offer sort of a brighter future than a lot of these teams. So, if Ryan Flaherty wants a managing job or the guy from Cleveland wants, I think he's going to probably have better options than the Minnesota Twins. I don't know
Very,
that.
very well. Yep.
So yeah, that's the candidates we know. Again, for all we know, Nelson Cruz has talked to him. Who knows? That just hasn't been reported. We can only really go by what's been reported.
I would not expect them to be an immediate hire or kind of.
Right.
Well, we should just give that caveat, which is like generally they don't like to do any sort of announcements from any Major League Baseball team of this sort of a hire during the World Series, like during the games, during the days of the World Series. They want that day to be about the World Series.
So you've seen each of the last 2 days, because it's break,
Right.
they've announced managers.
Right.
I went back and looked when Baldelli was hired. It was between Game 3 and Game 4 of the World Series.
Okay.
The October 19th or something, whatever it was in 2019 or 2018. And so I looked, the 2 off days for this year's World Series are October
Sunday,
26th and
right.
October 30th. If the Twins are
Okay.
going to make a quick hire, which I have no real strong feeling either way on that, those would be the 2 days. That
Well, especially if, like you say, they're kind of waiting out the market a little bit to see which of these guys might get hired by other teams, etc. So
now they could, before the World Series starts too, obviously make a hire. But and generally speaking, I would say teams want the manager in place by mid-November at the very latest. I mean, you talked about when Shelton got hired it was right around that time by the Pirates, because mid-November is the point where you start to go to the GM meetings, and then 2 weeks later is the winter meetings, and free agency kicks off, and you're going to want your manager to call prospective players, and you're also going to want your manager to be part of any conversation about the roster and that sort of thing. So I don't know that there's like a huge advantage to doing it immediately like the Giants just did versus right after the World Series, but that's generally the range. If it goes on much longer than that, if it's December, something went wrong.
yes, right.
I don't think any team, and especially not the Twins in this circumstance, would intentionally do that. Before we talk about a couple other news and notes to end here,
let's talk about our last sponsor, a brand new sponsor, Momentous. Momentous is, I became aware of them because of their protein powder. I'm taking one of those weight loss drugs, and one of the things that you have to be careful about when you take one of those weight loss drugs is being careful about your protein intake. You've got to try and keep your protein intake up, because protein, as you're eating less, your muscles still need the same amount of protein that they had before. And so, I've been taking their whey protein powder for a while, but they do all kinds of other stuff beyond that. And one of the ones that they've just released, that they asked us to talk about, is their new creatine chews. I have not had a chance to check out the creatine chews yet, but I did do a lot of research on creatine because I was like, what is this stuff? And like, is this even stuff that we want to do? Well, I mean, it's legitimate. Creatine is a thing that you use for muscle development. It's one of the more researched supplements lately that you can look at. And they've got these new creatine chews that they're bite-sized lemon lime chews, and they each have 1 gram of CreaPure creatine monohydrate. And I will just tell you, I did look up the creatine monohydrate. That is what you want to get when you're doing. You got to be careful about creatine supplements, and what you want to look for is whether or not they're giving you creatine monohydrate. And so that is what they have done. So Momentous has spent years testing this until they first created their first chewable that actually meets the Momentous standard: uncompromised science, meticulous sourcing, and real transparency. And so, if you are interested, if some of you are interested in building up some muscle mass, and I think as we get to winter and you can do less outdoors, and you're probably hitting the gym, if you're hitting the gym, you're probably concentrating more on muscle groups. I may have to start doing that soon if we want to try and run a 10-mile in May because it gets cold. We would tell you to check out Momentous and their creatine chews.
Yes, right now, Momentous is offering our listeners up to 30% off their first order. Just use the promo code Gleeman. Go to Live Momentous and use the promo code Gleeman for 30%, up to 35% off your first order. That's livemomentous.com with the promo code Gleeman. Okay. The Twins announced the winners of the Diamond Awards. Although the Diamond Awards themselves, the ceremony and the charitable dinner, sounds like it is no longer after 20 years and millions of dollars raised for the U of M hospital. That has been pushed by the wayside.
Yeah, and I would love to tell you more about that, but I haven't heard all the details about that yet. I've been on the board for that for a number of years, and this year I just wasn't as involved, and so I don't really know what the story is on that. That was something we have trumpeted here several times annually on the Gleam of the Geek podcast, because it was raising all kinds of money for some very crummy neurological diseases and some research on some of those things, but. Apparently that is going to be going away. And so these Diamond Awards that we're talking about are going to be awarded apparently on Friday night before Twins Fest as part of their sort of live Twins event or something.
Yeah, it is interesting that the things the Twins have always pointed to in good times and bad, but especially bad, where it's like, the team's not winning, but look at all the good things we do off the field to raise money for charity and to involve the fans, and we bring back all the alumni more than most teams. They've all started to kind of be clawed back lesser and lesser. They're getting rid of the entire Diamond Awards ceremony. Twins Fest has certainly shrunk compared to what it once was. Where they go to, what's it called? The caravan, the off-season caravan has certainly shrunk compared to what it once was. And there's a few other things that I can mention on that front too. It's kind of it's an interesting thing to be, you would think the worse the team is on the field and the less faith people have in the people running the team, the more you would want to lean into charitable endeavors, fun nights out that can get positive press for them, caravans to smaller markets that can promote the team, and you'd want to expand Twins Fest instead of making it smaller and all those things. But that doesn't appear to be the route that they're taking. But they did announce the Diamond Award winners. I'm assuming they're just going to keep calling them the Diamond Awards, but
I think so.
Who knows?
Yes.
No big surprises. I think I read my ballot, which I submitted at the end of the season. I think I picked all the winners. Although I know that's not the point of a ballot, but I guess a better way to say that was I think there was
your Prize Picks lineup was perfect.
Yeah, right. That would be interesting. I feel like I could do that pretty decently because you can poll. There's only like, I don't know, 20 voters or something like that.
Right, yeah.
I guess what I mean is there was a complete overlap between who I voted for and who won. I think there might have been one or two.
I mean, to be fair, there were mostly pretty obvious, right? Like,
yeah. And I wrote, we talked about this, but I wrote about it for The Athletic like a week ago where I laid out my ballot, and at least like 4 out of the 6 awards were like, who else was it going to be? Right. And so I'll read them off here. But I mean, obviously Byron Buxton was MVP. I believe he was unanimous, which is how it should be. Joe Ryan was the pitcher of the year. I think Duran got a vote if I remember, but it was close to unanimous. Okay. Keisho, rookie of the year. There were like literally no other rookie who did anything. Right. So that was, I'm certain, unanimous. Buxton also got defensive player of the year, which that one we talked with actually Betsy Helfand on the Patreon. If you want to hear an interview with Betsy Helfand of the Pioneer Press, we did it. Multiple people told me that was the funniest episode we've ever done.
Really?
Now, a good friend would have passed that feedback along to Betsy because she played a real role in that, obviously. I did not do that, but...
Yeah, we don't want her getting her head too big.
Yeah.
She should become in front of our jobs here.
No, she can have it. But it did feel good because it was one of those episodes where there was no Twins news. So we just sort of...
Right.
And we love Betsy. She's one of our favorite people. And she likes coming on the podcast. So we just sort of shot the S for 2 hours, and people were like, hey, that was pretty funny. She voted for Bader for defensive player of the year. Okay. And I know it was more of a split vote. And I totally get that. He was, inning for inning, he was their best defensive player. I didn't vote for him because he didn't play the last 2 months. And I think overall he had the 8th most innings, and Buxton played 30% more innings than him defensively. Buxton was solid in center, whereas Bader was amazing in left, but I gave it to Buxton, but I could have seen a argument either way, but Buxton won. Similarly, she voted, I think, for Louis Varland for most improved, which if you would have held the vote on July 30th,
Sure.
I would have said it should be unanimous, but it's a similar situation. He gets traded away, and then Austin Martin comes up and plays pretty well. So I voted for Austin Martin. He did win most improved over Louis Varland, but I think that was more of a split vote also. And then, let's see, Michael Bush of the Cubs was named Upper Midwest Player of the Year, which is always a funny
Right.
award.
Yeah,
to me.
that's right.
It's like a lot of these guys don't even they're not aware they won.
Right,
yeah, you were born here or you went to high school here, but it's like, I don't know. But Michael Bush is definitely a Minnesota guy,
Sure.
and had a all-star caliber year for the Cubs, so that was good to see. And then the last one, Pablo Lopez won the leadership award, and then Ryan Jeffers won for the second year in a row. I think it's called Media Good Guy.
Yep.
Is how we phrase it. It's basically the person who was the most quotable or the most helpful towards the media in terms of, standing up and being a leader in the, talking after losses, being charming, giving good quotes, that sort of thing. So we've talked about Jeffers.
Brooks Lee with the Community Service Award.
Yes, Brooks Lee with the Community Service one, which we don't vote on that.
Oh, really? Okay. I
don't know.
All right.
I don't even really feel comfortable voting on the leadership award.
I mean, yes, I agree
It's
with
like,
you.
I'm in
that'd
there
be
for
really
a half
hard
hour.
to go.
Like,
Right.
what do I know? I mean, you can ask around, which we do, but so those were the Diamond Award winners. Again, no shock. Although, would be an interesting over/under of how many winners will still be on the team come Twins Fest. Right?
Well, I mean, I on the ones where you could potentially have split it, I do notice that it ended up signing with guys who are still with the team.
Yeah.
Louis Varland produced, most improved over 4 months, where Austin Martin did it for 2 months. But Austin Martin's still with the team, and Austin Martin ended up getting the award.
That was the one I felt. The Buxton Bader, it's a similar kind of logic,
right.
but I
That's
felt
what I'm saying.
better about that.
Right.
The Martin one, I don't know. Maybe I mean, the Twins, not to pull back the curtain too much here, but the Twins obviously would greatly prefer award winners to, at the very least, be on the team still and perhaps even show up to accept their award, which is not going to happen with Harrison Bader. I guess, I don't know. It could have happened with Louis Varland.
Maybe Louis Varland's guy. He might not have anything going on that weekend.
You'd have somebody drive him over from North St. Paul. I mean, it's not that crazy that Louis Varland could do it. And then the last couple of just real small news and notes. Matt Mikulski, who will forever be a name I will remember because he was officially the player for whom Carlos Correa was traded. Right. I like that. You had forgotten. It's only been a few months. To never forget.
Well, we also talked about this on the Patreon just a while ago, but I was actually going Mikulski, and what? Here's the thing. I'm a visual learner. I couldn't spell it. I wasn't spelling it right. And then you mentioned who he was, and I'm like, oh yeah, M-I-K, not M-C-K.
You're a visual learner. That's interesting. I don't know what I am. I'm not really a learner. So
it really hampers you trying to learn a language when you're like, no, you need to spell that out for me, or I can't understand you.
I don't know what I am. I must be something. There's a sentence. I don't know what I am. I must be something.
Oh, you're something.
Yeah. I'm not big into learning. I'm really not. A visual, what are other types? Audio?
I guess so. I don't know. I'm just saying when it comes to stuff like that, I definitely, if I can read something like that, I'm like, oh, I know who exactly that is. But when you said the name, I was like, I do not know who that is.
Okay.
And then as soon as you said who he was, you started to say who he was. I'm like, oh yeah, I know that name because I can picture how you spell it.
Well, for the audio learners out there, I'll explain a little more about this. He was the player that Astros sent to the Twins as part of the Correa trade.
Right.
And even at the time, he's 26 years old, and he was pitching in relief at high A, which 26-year-olds should not be at high A. Right. And he was pitching like low leverage relief for the Astros high A team. And he had like a 7-something ERA, terrible secondary numbers. He was, realistically their worst pitcher in the entire organization, probably. Right. And we kind of joked at the time. And here's the other kicker. they had signed him as a street free agent to a minor league deal like a month earlier. So it's not like he had even been in an organization for 5 years and the Astros were like, take this guy. They literally like gave him nothing off the street and then sent him to the Twins.
Right.
What we talked about at the time was this is so transparently
Right.
an example.
It's almost like they're trying to insult. It's
Well-
almost like they're trying to insult you.
Yeah, you took it
Right.
a slightly different way. You took it as like Falvey, like almost sending a message to everyone and saying, "This is a trade I didn't want to make."
I said you. I to that. Well, Matt, maybe I was thinking the Astros were trying to send that
Okay.
message more so. Yeah.
Here's what I think it was, and this is just pure speculation on my part. I think either the Twins or the league or everyone involved did not want it to be just a pure, unadulterated salary dump.
Sure.
Which it would have been if no player came back to the Twins, because it would have just been the Twins eating
Right.
31 million and sending 104 million of contract, or 73 million, what's left of that, of contract back to the Astros. Well, you look at it that way. In the moment, 10 years later, 100 years later, you go, well, they didn't even get anything in return. This was
Right.
just them dumping it.
Right.
In this case, you can at least say, oh, well, they got a single A reliever back in
Right.
the deal.
That's right.
But the fact that it was a 26-year-old poor performing single A reliever who had been signed as a street free agent 3 weeks earlier kind of, gives away the game on that front, right? I mean, it's like,
Right.
And so I bring all this up. Sorry, Matt Mikulski and family, if you're listening to this, but because the Twins released him immediately after the minor league season ended, which is humorous to me. Probably not as funny to Matt Mikulski, but where it's just like
No.
we don't have anything to do with him. Like it was BS from the start. Like he was just a trivia question the whole time, or a trivia answer the whole time of who did they get for Carlos Correa. But it really sort of is a nice bow to place on that entire ordeal with Carlos Correa,
He
which
had
is
an
like
8.44 ERA for the Cedar Rapids Colonels in his
Right.
6 appearances with them, and 5.1 innings over
just
August and September.
his inclusion was a farce.
Yeah,
It was
right.
just
Yes,
like,
right.
we need somebody. And a part of me wonders, and maybe 2 years from now, somebody in the Twins front office will answer this question for me in a meaningful way just to satisfy my curiosity. But I really do wonder if it was something along the lines of the Twins saying, we need someone in return. Like we
Maybe.
need something in return. The Astros saying, well, we're not giving you anything of value in return.
Yeah.
And the Twins saying, give us literally your lowest ranked guy in the entire organization. And then saying, we got a 26-year-old high A guy we signed 3 weeks ago. You want him? Yes, done. Matt Mikulski. So I hope to never mention that name again, because it wasn't the greatest trade in terms of.
I bet you we do. I
Well,
bet you it becomes some sort of meme.
Yeah.
Inner
The Matt-
podcast meme.
the Matt
on us,
Mikulski Club?
That's
Yeah.
right, something like that.
Well, and here's the truth about this show. We just told you up front that we did 5 hours
Yeah. Right.
of 2 shows on Patreon. We talk a lot. We say pretty much every name you could possibly think of. Most of them we mispronounce, like Scott
Yes.
Cervais.
Yes. That's right.
For all I know, it's not even how you say Matt
You're right.
Mikulski. I don't know. I'm not a learner, so I don't know. One other very minor transaction. They claimed Ryan Kreidler off waivers from the Pirates, who had previously gotten him from the Tigers. So he's kind of a utility type of guy who's mostly played at AAA. He might be the kind of guy that you drop from the 40-man roster and try to pass through waivers and re-sign to a minor league deal or something like that. But here's what I would tell people. I remember we did this for Noah Davis when the Twins acquired him, and I said, if you want to laugh or to get sad, go to baseballreference.com and punch in Noah Davis and look at his numbers. And a bunch of people got the jump scare of doing that after we said to do that. I would encourage anyone to go to Baseball Reference and type in Ryan Kreidler, which is Kreidler. Go to Ryan Kreidler's page on Baseball Reference and just take a gander at his career numbers
That
over
OPS plus.
over parts of 4 seasons with the Detroit Tigers, including this year. He has 211 plate appearances in the majors.
Don't
and
ruin it. Don't ruin
89 well, the playing time ain't the part that I want people to look
it.
at.
Okay. All right.
211 plate appearances over 89 games spread across four seasons for the Detroit Tigers. Again, like I said, he was like a depth guy that they would call up from AAA now and then. I'm not going to ruin it for you, but I would like people to look at the career numbers. It will give you a jump scare. And that doesn't mean he wasn't worthwhile to claim off waivers. It just means, well, that's an interesting first offseason move for the Twins.
I'm doing a quick, what was Willie Castro's, who was also a pickup from the fourth, let's see. Oh, it's not titled. Well, significantly better than Mr. Kreidler's. So
you're significant. I mean, nobody's, well, I don't want to ruin it. Anyway. And then last thing, let's get your Timberwolves season predictions now that NBA is starting.
Oh my!
Did you make it your usual bet with the power trip guys?
I did not. Because I don't like if I was going to make the bet, I think the over under was 48.5.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And I would choose the under because that's what you always choose. You make money choosing the under on the Wolves. That's what you do.
Yeah.
Year after year. It's if you don't hit it this year, you'll hit it 4 of the next 5. So
there's the attitude I like.
So I mean,
you're not wrong, but if you would have bet, I wonder if you would have bet the under on every Timberwolves season. Oh, what you would be up? Well, because I mean, some of those years they're over.
Ask Power Trip Bets because he has the numbers. He will tell you. That's exactly right. You'd be up an enormous amount.
You say that, and I'm sure that you'd be up. But like a lot of those years, their over under was probably like 19 wins.
Yeah,
like it's pretty low. But anyway,
yes, it was.
I remember
the tragedy of it, Aaron.
I remember someone doing the math. If you'd have started betting on every Twins playoff game.
Right.
And you'd let it ride.
Parlay. Yeah. Right.
And it would have been 18 in a row. Right. You'd be like a billionaire or something like that. But anyway.
So what are we predicting? Tell me what I'm predicting. How far they get?
I mean, first of all, give me an over under on 48.5.
Under.
Okay.
And I'll give you the number 45.
Okay. So you think they'll make the playoffs?
Yeah, 46.
But probably not have home court in the Western Conference. Is brutal. I mean, it always is, but it's really.
Watching the game last night just brought it home again. Boy, those two teams are scary.
The thing, not only, you have some multiple championship caliber teams. I mean, OKC, Houston, Denver, Golden State. Maybe you could toss in a team or two, but and so that's getting home court is going to be a challenge for the Wolves. Obviously, top 4 seed. But then beyond that, this year feels different to me. The West is always just an absolute bloodbath. But the difference is there's only like 2 teams in the West not trying.
Right.
Where you go over to the East, it's like it's a tankathon, and the East just isn't as good. But usually, at least in the West, it's like, okay, well, there's 10 teams going for 8 spots, and then the other 5 aren't competing. Now it's like 12 teams or 13 teams going for the 8 spots or the 10 spots, I guess, with the play-in. So, yeah, I guess 48.5. That's a pretty big number. I'm a little surprised by that.
I think that's the number. It might have been 47.5, but
no, it was 48.5. I just love it. I guess I will also take the under just barely. I'm kind of hoping they finish in the 4 to 6 range, which is to say out of the play-in. They don't have to play their way in.
Which they did last year. They managed to pull that out.
Yep. Late. Yeah.
Late. Yeah.
I'm relatively optimistic.
Like literally they pulled it off after their last game.
Yeah, right.
But Golden State played later than them.
And this is a weird thing to say about the Wolves, and then we'll shut up. But they feel more built for playoff success than regular season success because they basically have like an 8-man rotation or a 7-man rotation now that they lost Nickeil Alexander. And I think, Terrence Shannon and Jalen Clark and, there are guys who can sort of fill those holes theoretically. But I think over the grind of like 82 games, they aren't reliant on depth.
Yeah.
Whereas like OKC, they give guys nights off, and like their 9th and 10th guy are legit. So it's like,
I think that it's easy to feel that way, given that they basically finished in the top 2 in the Western Conference the last 2 years, and they were not anywhere near the top 2 in the Western Conference in terms of how many games they won. Well, I guess 2 years ago.
2 years
ago,
they
were what, 3rd or 4th, something like that. But they still weren't top 2.
Well, one game separated.
Oh, is that right? Okay,
One
well,
from 3 or one from 4 when it was like Denver and whatever.
okay,
Yeah,
right. Oh, that's right. That's right. There was
it
a
was very
real
close.
logjam in
Yeah.
the top three, right? Um, so I think, and I think that's also probably the optimistic way of looking at them. They're going to have real trouble finishing in the top 2 or 3 in the Western Conference, but they could make a run in the postseason because they
Well,
managed to do
yeah.
that a couple times, right? That's sort of the optimistic way of looking at it. But I will. Uh,
Look at
I'm
how
not. I'm not.
serious
I'm,
John
I'm not.
takes.
I'm not putting him in the Western Conference Finals again this year. I'm putting him.
Oh,
I'm
well,
putting
yeah.
him. I'm putting him third. I'm putting him into the round, the semifinals. How about that?
I
Western
mean,
Conference
that's
semifinals. Yeah, that
let me
puts them as one of the top 4 teams in the Western Conference. Sure,
as a day one Wolves fan, that
sure,
would be their what third most successful season of all
sure.
time,
Yeah.
or fourth most
Were you
successful.
really a day one Wolves fan? Were you
I
there in
literally
1989 when
yes
they
at the
drafted
Dome.
Pooh Richardson? Okay, all
Yes,
right, okay.
I was at the
You were
Dome.
6,
You never
right?
seen a 6-year-old at a basketball
Okay,
game, John?
okay, all right, okay, all right,
Yeah,
good.
my uncle had seen. I remember going to the Dome. I mean, that was a couple years, I think, maybe at the Dome. But yeah,
Yeah, I think it was
um,
1, but maybe it might have been 2. Yeah, maybe a couple of years.
I've had this uh, ruining my brain for the maximum amount of time allowable. Timberwolves fandom is what I'm saying.
Okay, all right.
It has poisoned my life for the maximum amount of time possible. I was 6, and now I'm 42.
Did you
And
make it? Did you make it to the Michael Jordan game in the Dome where they set the attendance record?
no,
Okay, I was wondering about that.
I went to a college game where Anthony Hardaway played for Memphis. This must have been 92-ish or something like that. And I remember that was a big deal because they like presented it as like, oh, a dome. It's like a Final Four environment. And then
Right.
I've been to Final Fours and Elite Eights and
Yeah.
stuff at the dome because
Yep. I have too. Yeah.
I saw Dwayne Wade play there. I
Yeah,
saw
yeah.
some other people. Anyway, yeah, I guess I'll take the under 45, 46, 47 wins. I think they'll be like in the 5 to 8 range and then probably win a round of the playoffs, hopefully. But I'm relatively optimistic. I think Terrence Shannon is legit. I think
I'm
he's going to be
excited to see Terrence Shannon.
my
I'm
big sort
I'm
of
not particularly optimistic on Dillingham, but
that's what
I'm gonna
I'm
hold off.
the same. I think Jalen Clark is going to be a really good role player. I just don't know that he's going to be more than like a ninth man type of thing, but that's fine. He's going to be play defense and, hopefully shoot corner threes. The Dillingham thing, especially with Connolly being our age or my age at least, worries me a little bit.
Yeah.
I wonder how much flexibility they will have if Connolly looks like he did last year and Dillingham doesn't take a big step forward. How viable will it be from an asset standpoint for them to pick up a starting caliber point guard midseason,
Right.
which seems like
Yeah.
kind
I
of
mean, I don't have a ton of faith
tricky
in
thing.
DiVincenzo filling up the whatever gap those two can't fill either. So
Okay, there's been your 5-minute Wolves preview from two guys who no one should trust on Wolves things.
you can hear more of that probably on patreon.com/Gleeman. We will probably be talking some Wolves throughout the off season if you want to check in with us because we'll be catching some of these games. Also, I think next week we might be doing a live watch in of the World Series games, one of the World Series games, maybe World
Yeah.
Series game 4, I think Tuesday night is sort of the tentative plan. Also, if managerial news breaks, we will be doing an emergency podcast over there on Patreon. I should also mention, similar to us, you can, by the way, just download. If you sign up now, you can immediately get all the past episodes, including the hitters and pitchers we did. I think we're going to do a similar deep dive into the minor leagues with a special guest as well. We also have other special guests already chomping at the bit to come on here. Others beat writers besides Betsy Helfand and such. I don't know what you're doing if you're not checking out patreon.com/Gleeman. Like, get with it, gang. So that's
Get
my
with it.
takeaway.
Get with it, gang.
Get with it, gang.
Ooh.
Okay, but
It's a little cooler than a get with it, gang. It's not that much though, really, honestly. It's still just the two of us. Like,
but well, that makes you even more thankful that we've got sponsors to keep this one free. Those sponsors include Momentous and Harry's and Prize Picks and Factor. And a special thank you to our presenting sponsor, Black Stack Brewing, which is now being distributed all of Greater Minnesota and apparently in U.S. Bank Stadium, so I can drink it during Vikings game, which is awesome. So stop by your favorite liquor store or the Black Stack Tap Room to grab your favorite brew or try something new.
Your whole story on that was that you accosted some woman, right? Like,
turns out she also happened to be sitting next to me. I ran into her in the hallway, and she also was sitting next. No, yeah, and she was sitting next to me, and I was like, "Oh." As I sat down, I'm like, "Oh, well, that's nice that you're there." So we both raved about how much we like Black Stack Local 755 IPA.
I think sometimes John's like, he's either like Forrest Gump, where just stuff happens to him and he's involved, or he's like Stephen Glass, where he's just like, he makes up stories, but it's like, it's not worth even making it up because it sounds like like, yeah, I yelled at this woman, she had a beer, and then she sat next to me. It's like, no, she didn't. She didn't. But you know what? Get with it, gang.
Get with it, gang. You can hear more of those great stories on patreon.com/Gleeman.
And plus some stories I make up too. We can throw those in too. Sure, why not?
Bye-bye. And welcome to the end of this video. There's lots more. For another, just click on one of these boxes.
Or click on this circle in the middle to subscribe to all of our Twins Talk.
Thank you.
Gleeman